In the name of God, amen. Please be seated. So last week we discussed conflict, and more specifically, Christian strategies for dealing with conflict. Today we take a look at the mirror image of conflict resolution, forgiveness. You can't have any real resolution to any sort of conflict without forgiveness. And that's easier said than done. How many times should I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? 7 times? No, 77 times. Or some other versions say 70 times 7 times. If you're curious enough to think it through like I am, that one comes out to 490 times of forgiveness. But the point isn't the number of times. The point isn't how often we offer forgiveness. Even if you take the larger number, it's not like saying to your neighbor, okay, I've forgiven you once, 489 times to go. That's not the point. The point is that forgiveness is an ongoing process. Forgiveness can't end. A truly forgiving heart draws from a well of love and grace that never runs dry. When you can't forgive anymore, that's when it's time to dig deeper and find a way. Just as is true with so much of the Christian message, this too is a challenging situation, challenging instruction. In the church, we know, at least intellectually, that we are charged to replicate the kind of forgiveness that has been extended to and modeled for us. But the problem with that is too often we try to rush forgiveness without doing the work that true forgiveness requires. Because we think it's what we ought to do, we often proclaim forgiveness before it's actually real for us. In his book, Don't Forgive Too Soon, Dennis Lin compares the process of forgiving with the process of overcoming grief. Just as recovery from grief can't be rushed, we also can't be rushed into forgiveness if it's actually to be real and genuine. You've probably all heard about the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. But Lynn writes about those as 5 stages of forgiveness. Recognizing the close relationship between the two, he uses that as a framework to examine how we can move beyond pro forma expressions of forgiveness that we tend to assume are expected of us into more genuine forgiveness, the kind that springs from a place of deeper truth. And the truth is, if forgiveness doesn't come from a place of truth, it will breed resentment. A common idea in 12-step and recovery groups says that resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Without forgiveness, we are destined to breed resentment in our hearts, and it will kill us spiritually. Even if our brother or sister might only cause offense once, even then we have to forgive 70 times 7. Only then can it begin to come from a place of truth. Fact is, we do hurt one another. We do offend the heart of God. We exploit each other. We betray each other. We fail to recognize the humanity in each other. We are all victims of this behavior, and we are all guilty. But we must learn to forgive even when it's not easy to do so, and even when it doesn't make much sense in our hearts. It can seem all but impossible, but we have to do it. We have to find a way to forgive because it is the call of Christ, but also because it's necessary for our own spiritual health and wellness. We have to keep finding ways to forgive, even in the face of our deepest pain, because even when we think it's over, even when we think the pain is past, the work is not yet done. We often talk a lot about justice. Through the years, our country's taken a lot of steps for good or for ill for doling out justice around the world. The criminal justice system attempts to pass out justice in the form of punishment for people every day. But too often we have mistaken revenge for justice. In the end, true justice will only ever come alongside deep forgiveness. It's only in a world where forgiveness is a way of life that we can ever hope to find real justice. And forgiveness will only ever become a way of life when we keep practicing it. 77 times. 7 times 70 times. Whenever the hurt and the anger and the fear are renewed, that's when it's time to try to forgive again. Not just because it's the right thing to do, but because doing it will make things right. How many times are we to forgive our brothers or sisters when they sin against us? As many times as it takes. There isn't a real number. Unlike conflict resolution, there isn't some clear, methodical process for forgiving. It happens in the heart. It happens in its own time. We just have to keep doing it. Not just saying, I forgive you, but actually trying to find forgiveness. Again and again and again and again. Until true, deep, holy, and healing forgiveness is found. We have been forgiven by the God who keeps creating us. We keep being forgiven by God. Again and again. As a witness to the love of that same God, we are called to forgive also. Amen.